So I became an accidental midwife. It had never been on my dream career list, but I stumbled across it, and the adventurer in me thought, well, why not give this a whirl? And my midwifery brought me all around the world, working in many diverse environments. One country in particular, which impacted me the most, was Liberia in West Africa, where I was on a mission with Doctors Without Borders. This is a country that has one of the highest maternal and fetal mortality rates in the world. And through the trauma that I witnessed every day for a year, I noticed that a fear began to creep into my midwifery practice. I began to lose the trust and the confidence in the woman's ability to give birth. When I returned from Liberia, I found that I was starting to avoid working in the birthing room, and I would make excuses to work in other areas. Parallel to this, I wished to start my own family with my partner. This was not going according to plan. What followed were years of fear, grief, and turmoil, while I became increasingly aware that I would never become a mother, and increasingly more fearful of childbirth and of my practice as a midwife. Then I discovered the gift that is mindfulness, and I knew immediately that this was something I wanted to bring to future parents. So when I first signed up for MBCP teacher training, my intention was solely to see how I could bring this wisdom to the parents that I work with. But to my surprise, MBCP had another plan, and I very quickly realized that MBCP was first and foremost, and still is, a new understanding as to how I navigated this world as me. My nomadic days had been tempered throughout this time, but one day I got a phone call and I was asked to go and work in a refugee camp in Jordan for Syrian refugees. My response to this was visceral. I knew that despite my intense fear, I just had to go, particularly as I was married into a Syrian family. Daisy, of course, was packed along with all my other essentials and traveled to Zaatari refugee camp on the Syrian-Jordanian border in the middle of the desert. I remember the contractions of fear through the long journey across Europe and Jordan to arrive at camp. Here I was, tense as far as the eye could see, cacophony of voices and cars and beeping, searing heat and dust and sand rising up with each step that I took. I arrived to a rush greeting from the midwifery team in place, and before I'd even placed my rucksack on the ground, I was asked to take care of a woman who was going to give birth imminently. What arose was a massive contraction, huge wave of nausea. Breathe, Denise. The walk to that woman's side was the longest and shortest of my life. I felt every touch of my feet on the ground, the hot sand pouring in through my sandals, the feel of my ragged, rapid breathing as I made my way to the birthing room. I walked into a room which was an outward scene of my internal turmoil. A 22-year-old, very recently widowed woman, at the end stages of labor with her first child in full panic. Her mother shouting at the translator to do something to help her, and the translator shouting back, and me, this foreign midwife, terrified and unable to communicate or speak Arabic proficiently. Breathe, Denise, just breathe, trust. Feet on the ground. It's very hard to articulate what happened in the next instances. But I started talking to this beautiful woman in front of me. I didn't say anything meaningful or profound. I just invited her to keep looking in my eyes and breathe with me. And soon the room and us four women were enveloped in a bubble, all breathing together. Then we were all pushing together. These waves of pushing and breathing, all in synchronicity. Then crying and laughing together as we welcomed her magnificent little girl to the world. And in those moments, I fell head over heels in love with that woman. I knew what unconditional love was. I knew I'd jump in front of the bus for this woman. I knew I was already a mother, and I always had been. And I knew that I'd found my love again, my love of midwifery. So thank you just seems too small of a word to contain the expansiveness of love and gratitude I feel for the wisdom of Nancy and Daisy, my two midwives. Thank you and happy birthday.